Welcome to In Layers, where we explore the people and the tech behind artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Ron Green, and I'm delighted to have my co-founder and managing director of KUNGFU.AI joining me today, Stephen Straus. Stephen is a visionary entrepreneur whose career spans successful startups, venture investing, and important work in the nonprofit sector, where he applies his entrepreneurial spirit to tackle pressing social issues. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Stephen's perspectives on the ever-evolving landscape within AI, the importance of ethics and psychological safety when building high-functioning teams, and his dedication to making AI and its future inclusive for everyone. Stephen is a serial entrepreneur and former venture capitalist. He was a general partner at Austin Ventures during the dot-com era, which was then the largest venture capital firm between the two coasts. Stephen foresaw that AI would be the most significant technology development in our lifetime and co-founded KUNGFU.AI, a management consulting and engineering firm focused exclusively on artificial intelligence, in 2017. He's a graduate of Colgate University and received his MBA from Harvard Business School. Stephen lives in Austin with his terrific wife, Tina, and they have 4 great kids. Stephen, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while.
As have I.
All right. So we've been running this company, KUNGFU.AI, for over 6 years now. I blame you for the whole thing. It was really all your idea. Let's go back to the beginning. Back in 2016, way before the AI wave, you really foresaw it coming. What was it that attracted you to AI? What made you so confident that this was going to be important?
Well, that's a good question. And I really have no idea exactly what it was. But as I was thinking what I wanted to do next, as I was winding down my involvement in my previous startup, for some reason, I got conviction that AI was going to be the next big wave. And I had lived through and had really a front row seat to the internet revolution during the 90s when I was at the venture capital firm that I was at. And for some reason, kind of my pattern matching brain kicked in, and I thought, that I really got conviction around the fact that AI was going to be the next large wave. McKinsey and others say that this is the largest technical shift that any of us will live through in any of our lifetimes. And back then, long before people were saying that, I thought this is what I wanted to go do next. And I thought it was actually going to come much sooner than it ended up taking, because now we're in 2024.
Right.
But so 8 years later, when I was thinking about this, 7 and 8 years later, but initially I thought about building a product company in the AI space, and I'll tell that story. That's actually how you and I met.
Let me tee that up, because I was kind of curious about that as well. So we met, we both have deep product backgrounds. We were both looking to do something in the AI space as our next ventures.
In the product space.
In the product space and within AI. And you became convinced that the timing wasn't great for a product company, and convinced me rather that services was the right place. What was your thought process there?
Yeah. So initially I was thinking about a whole range of product ideas. And, what I was finding is that the ideas and, the due diligence, I had my venture hat on and I was thinking about, due diligence on these ideas, and they just weren't converging in my mind that, that they were going to be good opportunities. And a lot of it came down to the technical risk. So, back then the technology was moving fast. It's moving even faster now. And I really worried that, one random Tuesday, we would be a successful company. We'd raised a bunch of money. We were a leader in our product category. And, we'd get blindsided by some kind of technical shift, and our technical asset would, overnight turn into technical debt.
Right.
And, when I was in the venture world serving on people's boards of companies that I invested in, I was in those situations, and those are very painful board meetings. And, it's hard to pivot through those situations. And then, there were a variety of other things that I was thinking about. One of the key other ones was that if I were to build a product company and it needed the data of its clients, then I would be in the services business, because, you'd have to go see if they had the data. You'd have to go see if you could get it. You'd have to get it. You'd have to, clean it up. You'd have to ingest it, train your model on it. And that's all before you could go on to the next sales opportunity. Well, that is not a repeatable sales model that's, scalable like venture firms want for product companies. And again, I've also been in those board meetings where the company doesn't have the opportunity to grow and scale, more than linearly like you can with a services, play.
Right.
And so when I started thinking about that, those two things together, among other things, those negatives in a product, context are actually positives in a services context. And so, I really switched my thinking to starting a services company, which is something I had done before. So this is my sixth startup,
right?
But second professional services firm. And when you and I met, I was ahead of you in that thinking, and you were like, I'm going to build a product company.
Absolutely.
And I said, I was thinking about the same thing, but here are the reasons why I decided not to.
I know. I like to joke that it frustrates me, but you are absolutely correct about all of that. So and we've seen that over the last, 6+ years. I know a dozen plus companies that they put millions into product development, and then they were undercut by some advancement. And I know of maybe 4 or 5 that were undercut just last year by ChatGPT.
Yeah. And I know, probably the same number personally, but then I also think about those charts that the investment bankers put together that have like 100 logos on one piece of paper, and all the different categories of AI product companies.
Yeah.
And I just think so many of those companies have been, they've seen better days, and they're not going to, many are not going to recover. I think billions of dollars, have already been lost in the AI space, and many, many more will be lost. And I'm just glad that, we're running a bootstrap services company where the more change that happens, the more, we can be helpful to our clients, as opposed to
it's really true
getting eclipsed.
Yeah, it's really true. And the faster things move, and if anything, they are accelerating, the more challenging it is for all of us to stay on top of things and make sure that we're building products that are state of the art.
Yeah. And it's also, really fun to be able to, and exciting and gratifying to be able to help our clients, get competitive advantage in this fast-moving space, which is what you and I set out to do from the very beginning, and the whole company is, is focused on.
Right. So, most people out there are aware of AI at this point. In fact, they may feel a little bit saturated with how much talk there is of artificial intelligence today. But I think the vast majority of people really only know about maybe ChatGPT, maybe a couple other things, and they think generative AI is sort of really synonymous with AI. But it's such a more vast landscape out there. Do you have any thoughts on that, and how companies can sort of avoid having blinders around generative AI?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. And I'm going to go back to the internet era as a guide for this, because there's definitely not perfect parallels between the transition that happened as we entered into the age of the internet and as we enter the age of AI, but there are lessons to be learned. And so, when I think back to the, 96, 97, 98 time period with the internet, people's imagination for what you could do with the internet was, hey, I can replace my brochure.
Right.
I have a home page now, so I don't need to reprint my brochure. And, I have email through AOL, and that's the internet. And, you know what? I'm going to add a shopping cart to my website, and we're going to sell something. So we're an e-commerce company. And so, those are very narrow point examples of what the internet is, but no one would say those are the internet, right? And now, 25 years later, we have a very broad, rich, and deep understanding of what the internet is and can do, and it's still evolving, obviously. So if with that as context, I feel like we're in the same place as it relates to AI. And so people are thinking of ChatGPT and large language models and the ability to do generative AI for what you can do now, which is, as an example, type into a prompt and get a result back as AI. But, the way I think about it is that AI is a large and rich, there's a whole tool set in a toolbox, under this heading of AI. And ChatGPT and large language models are definitely the newest tool in that toolbox. They're definitely the shiniest tool in that toolbox. but they're also the least mature and maybe not the least likely to bring enterprise value and ROI to companies today, but they are definitely not in the top, tools.
Right.
And so I think what will happen over the next couple of years is people and companies will come to realize that the toolbox is really, quite broad in what you can do. And, lots of other capabilities for developing ROI.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say also, Ron, is that people know this, but they haven't really necessarily put two and two together. On our phones, as an example, with social media, our feeds are an example of very advanced predictive analytics, right? They're doing incredible matching of what my preferences are with other people, and they're teeing up content that is, statistically likely to be very interesting to me. And, when we see the front page of an e-commerce site, we see things that we didn't even know we wanted, but we're like, oh my gosh, I want that. It's the same kind of, AI-driven predictive analytics based
Right.
on their profile of me. And so we intuitively know that there's a lot more tools out there, just from our everyday experiences, any kind of self-driving car, or,
Right.
our being able to talk to your phone and have speech to text. And,
Right.
these are all examples of AI, and they all have, enterprise-wide applicability.
Right. I think generative AI as a whole probably constitutes maybe less than 25% of the type of projects we're doing. We have a dozen plus projects we're working on at any point, and they're broadly grouped into computer vision, natural language processing, predictive analytics, et cetera. And I couldn't agree more. As important and as impressive as some of the advancements within generative AI have been, applying them to the enterprise is still really challenging at this point. And I think I think a lot of companies may be disheartened if that's their first step into AI.
Well, yes, but we all can get personal advantage out of it, right? By
That's right.
helping craft emails and any other things that we have to write. And of course, marketing and customer service with chatbots, et cetera, can get
as long as there's a human in the loop.
Yeah, that's right. And you can get enterprise value, but, it's very clear that there's, broad and deep capabilities and lots of, use cases across all functional areas
Right.
in the enterprise, and also across, most, if not all, industries at this
Right.
point.
And to be clear, I think some of the shortcomings we're seeing right now within generative AI, we're going to overcome soon. Certainly within, I think, the next 2 to 3 years.
Absolutely.
So I want to pivot a little bit. Culture has been a real important touchstone for you and for me from the get-go at KUNGFU.AI. And I think that it is really one of our differentiators. But, there's this sort of say-do gap typically I find within companies, where companies will talk about how important culture is and then talk about how important their people are, and then work them 80 hours a week, right? And just grind them down, right? And there's one anecdote that I just thought was amazing. So we have AI for Good initiatives at KUNGFU.AI, where we give our time to nonprofits. And I remember when we were starting the company, and we're just crazy busy, and we're trying to get things off the ground. And I had pushed back a little bit on saying something effective: do we have time for this? And I'll never forget, you said, Ron, if we don't have time now for nonprofits when we're starting the company, we'll never have time. We've got to lean into this. And that really blew my mind. And you were so right. So could you just speak a little bit to your experiences developing the culture at KUNGFU.AI, of which I'm so proud, and why that's so important to high-functioning teams?
Well, sure. Well, there's, I think, two parts to that question. There's this culture, and then there's giving back. So I'll start with giving back, and then I'll talk about culture. As we enter this age of AI, the people at our company, myself included, are, among the most well-positioned people on the planet, because the whole world is shifting, and we're at the leading edge of that. And, I have a strong belief that people who have, kind of to whom much is given, they have much responsibility. And so as we enter this new age, we get, because we are at the leading edge of it, we are, in essence, leaders in this space, even if we don't want to be. And, what we do collectively, the people who are, starting in this age, we get to define what this looks like and at least the direction that it goes in. And the thing that weighs on me and is that, every technology throughout human history has been used for both good and ill. Like you can go back to the discovery of fire. Well,
Right.
fire has been unbelievably important, right? You can cook things, you can warm yourself, et cetera, but you can also be an arsonist and you can burn down a house. And so every technology ever invented by, humans, by people, have been used for good and ill. And AI is arguably the most powerful technology that we have ever developed. And so it has incredible opportunities for great good, but also for really bad stuff. We're already seeing it. I mentioned social media feeds, just a moment ago. The second and third and fourth order effects of social media companies trying to make more money is that our kids, the mental health of our kids and lots of adults are not good. Our democracy and democracies around the world are challenged because of the algorithmic feeds in our social media. I could go on, but we're just getting started in the age of AI, and we're already seeing these really bad consequences. And so that was some of my thinking going into all this. Now, as far as AI for good and our initiatives there, I'm actually, continued to be disappointed that we haven't really kind of, figured out what we should be doing to have as large of impact as I'd like to have. And so I'm very proud of the work that we've done. But as you know, I'm still struggling. I think we're still struggling to figure out, what's the best use of our time and efforts and energies to try to, to give back. But, if anyone's listening to this podcast and wants to collaborate on that, you can think of this as like a bat signal into the sky, and you can respond to it. But, I am proud of the work that we've done, and I really do want to, figure out what it is that we can do to have a as big of an impact as possible to make the world the kind of future we want to live in.
Right. I want to go back to the second part of that question around the company culture.
Sure.
So, without question, I think the culture we have at KUNGFU.AI is one of our differentiators. The people are just amazingly smart and talented, but they're just also just some of the nicest, kindest people you would ever meet and want to work with. And I think that culture has really differentiated our ability to deliver good work for our clients. Do you have any advice for companies that are trying to maybe hire their own AI teams, right?
Yeah.
This, very specialized talent, how they can go about finding and maintaining the type of talents that we've found and maintained?
Yeah. So I want to back up and give credit where credit is due, in that when you and I started this company with our two other co-founders, one of those co-founders, Steve Meyer, said to me, early on, he's like, Stephen, we really need to be thinking about our company culture and what we want that to be. And I remember just thinking, like, I had like a blank stare on my face, and I'm like, I really don't know what you're talking about. And I look back on that and I think, as I said, this is my sixth startup. I never once thought, and I say this with, kind of embarrassment and shame. I never once thought about being intentional about company culture.
Right.
And the company cultures that we ended up having were just happenstance.
Right.
They weren't shaped by intentionality, et cetera. And this is by far the best place I've ever worked. And the culture is, by far the best culture I've ever worked in. And I have really enjoyed learning about culture and have really enjoyed helping shape it here. And so to answer your question at the highest level, the answer is to be intentional. How do you build a culture that will attract and retain and allow, world-class cutting-edge, machine learning engineers to do cutting-edge work? It's to be intentional about it. Now, where do you, kind of go from there? So double-clicking. My view is that to do leading edge work, you have to be willing to fail, because if you're trying something new for the first time, you are going to make mistakes.
Right.
And so how do you help people be comfortable trying something that is not likely or necessary? It's not that it's not likely, but it's not certain to work. You have to build an environment where they can say, I failed. I tried this and it didn't work. And ideally before that, they would say, I'm not sure if I know how to do this. Can I get some help? Maybe someone else can
Right.
give me help. And, the opposite of that is arrogance and, feeling like you have to pretend, or bluff your way through things. Those things don't let you do cutting edge work, or at least not for very long. And how do you set the conditions for being able to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I failed. What are we going to do next? Well, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And, vulnerability is just a critical component of this. And we're not especially people at my advanced age and your advanced age, we entered the workforce where it was not common to be vulnerable at all.
That's absolutely true.
You did not talk about, your personal life, the things that you're struggling with,
right?
Et cetera. And shout out to Brene Brown, which is who's a vulnerability researcher. But when I found Brene Brown, and I just consumed as much of her podcasts and books, et cetera, as I could, and learned a ton about all this. And it led me to learn about a woman named Amy Edmondson, who I've had a chance to meet at this point, who wrote the book The Fearless Organization, and she makes the strong argument that the preconditions for being able to have a culture where you can be vulnerable is to have a culture of psychological safety. And so, as I put this whole puzzle together, it's if you have a culture of psychological safety, you can be vulnerable, you can build a team that's willing to ask for help, take risks, be willing to fail, celebrate those failures. And with that, then you can do cutting edge AI. And so in my mind, there's this incredible irony that to do this incredibly technical work, you also have to have a strong emphasis on these very soft concepts and these soft skills.
Yeah.
That, are all around emotional intelligence. And so long way of saying, to the advice I'd give to people who are trying to build AI teams, you really have to make sure that you have a culture across the company, not just within a small department, that is able to support them, because otherwise it is very challenging to do this kind of work and be able to have success.
I couldn't agree more. And we've talked about this so many times. One of the key things that I see that I think really makes a difference is when you have senior, experienced leaders within the team, let's say within engineering, that are willing to raise their hands and say, I got stuck, or I don't understand something and they need help. And if you have that sort of top-down vulnerability, that's how you infuse it throughout your entire culture.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I have come to realize that there is a lot of whoever sits in my seat, right? And I'm in the managing director / CEO seat, but, whoever sits in my seat has to be, a leader in establishing and defining and role modeling the culture, and to stay with that. People will certainly listen to you, but they were much more likely to watch your actions. And so I actively think about where I spend my time, what meetings I show up to, and what I focus on, and those things, because, again, people watch what you do much more than they listen to what you say.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the early stage of the company and talk about some of the decisions we made early on around ethics. And in fact, we actually declined our first business opportunity for ethical reasons. And, we both believe that this is as important, not only to us as a company, but to AI as a future, as the culture is, right? So let's talk a little bit about the importance of ethical considerations within AI.
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned with culture, this was new to me. So as we were talking to this company about potentially working with them, without going into any details because I think it's not relevant and the like. But it just did not seem like a good fit for us. I think the ethics of the company I wasn't comfortable with, and I struggled with it. And I ended up saying, let's not pursue them and let's not work with them. And I think back to earlier in my career, and I've thought about this, multiple times. In the first company I started, I did a bunch of work with Philip Morris, the cigarette company. And, I look back in kind of shame and embarrassment, like, why didn't I think about not working with them? It never crossed my mind that I should say no to them. I did work for them among a bunch of other clients, but, as I was making that decision to say, let's not work with this company, I thought, wow, I wish I had had the confidence and the presence of mind to do that much earlier in my career. And I'm really glad that we did it now because, we have, as you know, turned down more than a handful of companies, either because we thought that the companies were, didn't have a kind of a strong ethical compass and it didn't align with ours, or the projects that they were asking us to work on were things that, were going to lead potentially to a future that we would not want to live in,
right.
Because it would be, dystopian,
right.
a dystopian future. And, that really has led to something that has been, I think, really impactful for the company. And again, we made this up collectively on the fly, but it was something I'd never done before in my career. But as we were talking about that first client, we ended up turning those discussions into what became a weekly, meeting that we have that we call the ethics discussion group, which we have now done almost continuously every week for the past 6 years. And getting back to that point about, people watch what leaders, do, I realized that, I needed to attend every one of those or as many as I could. And I think I've attended 95+% of those
mm-hmm.
meetings over the last 6 years. I also really enjoy those meetings, so it's not hard to do. But, we talk about the ethics of any projects that are coming up. If anyone raises any concerns.
Right.
And, we have also built out our ethics statement. We have signed some pledges of things that we are not willing to work on. And we continue to talk about those things. And, I think it's been a strong basis of the foundation of our company that people can, openly talk about whether they're worried about the kinds of work that might be coming in the door. And, we give them permission to say, I personally wouldn't want to work on this project, or
right.
I wouldn't want to be even at a company that would work on a project like
right.
this. And, in the end, I make those decisions. We call it the ethics discussion group. I call it that for a reason, because it's not a decision-making, body or organization. But I've rarely had to unilaterally make any decisions, because we talk about things and generally come to the right answer
right.
Out of those things. But it's been a strong foundation, I think, for our culture.
I agree, because we can we can have dissent given room to express itself for any deal that may come through the pipeline, and talk about it in a way that sometimes I would argue in other companies might hurt feelings, get a little ruffled feathers. But at KUNGFU.AI, we just fly right through it because everybody trusts each other, like we talked about before.
Yeah, and that's where psychological safety and vulnerability are a key component of the culture that allow us to have those conversations and allow people to feel comfortable to express those opinions, even in the presence of someone who sits in my chair. I mean, me, but importantly, the position that I hold.
Right, exactly. So, all right, so we were both around for the .com bubble, and there was, I think, a lot of people who maybe have gone through that transition look back upon those early days before the internet sort of was, quote unquote, monetized as being, maybe the golden age. Do you have any sense now that we may be in that sort of same phase in AI? We're going through maybe what be the pre-monetization golden age in any way?
Well, Ron, I think that that's really up to us, because the implied in the question is that the world's going to get worse than it is today. And I hope that that is not the case. We are, I think, definitely in an early stage, and I think we are, kind of naive, because we don't know what's going to be invented and how these tools are going to be used for ill. Even if we have a sense of how they're going to be used for good. But, what I would say to, and what I do say to people who are leading companies who are leaning into AI, is that we all get to define what this future looks like. And so I'm hoping that the future is bright and that the future will be more positive than today. And I think we've learned a lot from the internet, that you can't just allow, things to happen. You have to be intentional about it, and you have to be willing to make hard decisions. And it all comes down to, leaders being willing to be, strong and have strong boundaries. If you have a model that's out in the world, an AI model, and it's helping make decisions, et cetera, and you find out that there's significant second and third order, negative ramifications, then you need to pull that model, or you need to retrain it or realign it to the goal that you are trying to achieve. It is unacceptable not to do that. And I look at the social media companies and think that they have failed in their, many of them, if not all of them, have failed in their, civic responsibility to do that. And it's all in the name of, greed.
Yeah, profit and eyeballs.
Yeah, and I argue that, you can build a more successful business by being ethical and doing the right things. People will be attracted to your company. I think there's a huge vulnerability in the social media space. Everybody knows these things are damaging us. If someone were to come up with a social media platform that wasn't, I think people would flock to it. And so I think that they have a big blind spot. And I think that same, set of thinking is important to take into the age of AI as companies start to navigate it for themselves.
Well, as we transition towards the end here, we'll transition to a little bit of a lighter note.
Yeah, sorry, I got a little heavy there.
No, that was great. That was great. We love to ask folks how they would choose to have AI. If they could make a decision, automate something in their daily life, what would you pick?
Okay, so I was struggling with this because on the one hand, I don't know that I want anything automated, because I think I have too much tech in my life. And, I think as people, we need to, I need to take my, face out of the screen and get more exercise and definitely more face-to-face contact with people, especially coming out of the whole pandemic era, et cetera. So, with that said, and this is very much a double-edged sword in what I'm going to express, but I told you that all technologies that have been invented by people have, been used for good or ill. And I definitely foresee a day when we have AI capabilities that are able to coach us as people, almost like a therapist, to, think through things and get ourselves unstuck from an emotional point of view, and help us, find a positive headspace to try to be better people and to, better able to navigate the world, because the world is hard to navigate. And, I think that there will be, AI capabilities that are as, good as in a lot of cases in the moment as a good therapist to help you, get unstuck. And the reason that I am, also worried about that is that those could be used for ill. They could be used, potentially
Mm-hmm.
as an example to convince you of something that's not in your best interest or not in the best interest of society. And so, what I'm hoping happens is that, through appropriate regulation and the ethical use of AI, that we can have a world that has these kinds of capabilities without the downsides that, could clearly come with them. And so,
Right.
again, I think it's back to, we get to help make the future that we want to live in. And I'm very hopeful that we can make that a positive future.
Well, Stephen, I thank you so much for coming on, partner. I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to this for weeks.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Hidden Layers. This series is hosted by KUNGFU.AI, a management consulting and engineering firm focused exclusively on artificial intelligence. If you have any questions or thoughts about today's episode, or if you know someone we should feature, please visit us at KUNGFU.AI.